With the goal of not dilly-dallying around, I shall not delay any longer. Introduce tonight's speaker, Lloyd Smith. Using descriptive language in his speech is a lot like using hot sauce in cooking. Guess you could use too much. There's a very fine line between interesting and painful. Lloyd believes the reason the descriptive language is being used should dictate the amount that's used. Lloyd believes the reason the descriptive language is being used should dictate the amount that's used. For tonight's speech, he's revised one of his humorous speech contest entries. The original version of the speech has descriptive words spread on it like a thick layer of peanut butter. This revised version, which is about 50% newly worded, uses them more subtly to paint a picture. Actually, Lloyd began with a real picture by Norman Rockwell. It provoked a memory which led to the speech. The humor comes from the juxtaposition of the Rockwell scene and some unexpected details. The original version of the speech won the District 9 Humorous Speech Contest in 2015. The most interesting thing about the contest was that the second place speech was plagiarized. This revised version, Yikes. Elective Project 2 for Level 3 of the Presentation Mastery Path, is what Lloyd wishes he had given in Pendleton that day. Lloyd Smith and Get Down!
It was a Friday evening in the summer of 1958. I was a 10-year-old kid growing up in the Spokane Valley. My 6-year-old brother and I looked up when we heard our dad come into the living room. He was carrying his Texaco road map, and our hearts sank because we knew that he was planning the Sunday drive. Fellow Toastmasters, if your anxiety doesn't jolt a little bit at the term Sunday drive, it's because you're on the younger side of the generation gap from those of us who are a bit more seasoned. Back then, every middle-class family took a drive nearly every Sunday. The Sunday drive was exactly that. The entire family got in the car and drove somewhere. Why? Because nearly every middle-class family took a drive every Sunday. Our destination that week was going to be Steptoe Butte. If you've never gazed on that scenic wonder, picture a colossal gray rock sticking up out of the Palouse a little bit, about 20 miles from Colfax. That's it, a gigantic rock sticking up in the middle of nowhere. On Sunday afternoon, we all piled into our family car, a 1953 Plymouth Belvedere 4-door sedan, dark green with a genuine vinyl green and white plaid interior, scientifically designed to capture and hold all of the summer heat. We looked like every other family out for a drive that day. In the front seat, the driver's seat, my dad was wearing dress slacks, a short-sleeve white dress shirt, black clip-on tie, and a gray fedora. Next to him, Mom was wearing a brightly colored summer print dress. In the back seat, my brother and I and his coffee can were slouched in misery. Coffee can? You see, my brother enlivened our Sunday drives by becoming violently car sick repeatedly. That's why we had an empty 2-pound Maxwell House coffee can lined with a couple of sheets of the Spokesman Review newspaper in the back seat with us. It was every bit as wonderful as it sounds. We made it to Steptoe Butte, looked at the rock and said, "Yep, that's a great big rock in the middle of nowhere," and then we got in the car and headed for home. I was dozing in the back seat, leaning as far away from my brother and his coffee can as I could get when it happened. The car began to lurch from side to side on the road. I woke up suddenly. My mom was screaming, and my dad was shouting words I had never heard him say before. He slid the car over onto the shoulder of the road and skidded to a stop, and then he began to have what looked like a fit in the front seat. He was slapping at himself and squirming around. His knees went up above his head at least 2 times. Finally, he shoved open the door and fell out onto the pavement. He was flailing around, still shouting. The fedora flew off and got mashed under him. He started tearing at his shirt and finally threw it on the ground, while my mom helpfully said, "Don't tear your good shirt, don't tear your shirt." He began kicking his feet, his heels on the pavement, and started to spin in a little circle. My brother and I were hanging out of the back window watching this most amazing sight. And my brother saw them first. He said, "Wow, look at all those bees." But they weren't bees, they were yellow jackets. About half a dozen of them flying around my dad and stinging him. Did you know that when yellow jackets get agitated, they can sting you repeatedly? That was the most interesting thing I ever learned on one of our summer drives. Why were the yellow jackets agitated? Because as my dad had been driving along with his elbow up on the ledge of the window, he had scooped up a little swarm of them into the sleeve of his shirt. He was not pleased, and neither were the yellow jackets as it happened. Finally, they flew away, or they stopped stinging my dad and flew away, and he lay there on the pavement moaning a little bit. Then he got up, put on the remains of his shirt, stuffed the clip-on tie in the pocket of his pants, picked up the crushed and dirty fedora and stuck it on his head and climbed back into the car. He sat there gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles, trembling a little bit, until my mom said, "Well, at least no one got hurt." Dad turned and looked at her for what seemed like an hour. Then he turned back, yanked the car into gear, stomped the gas, and we roared off towards Spokane. My brother and I were in the back seat, still astonished at the spectacle we had just witnessed. He was so surprised that he didn't even get sick on the way home. As the years rolled on, those childhood memories slowly faded away, until one day in the middle 1980s, when I was watching the TV news. They were doing a story about a cultural phenomenon that was sweeping the nation. And as I watched the story, I realized I had seen that before. On that lonely road near Colfax, in view of Steptoe Butte, next to that roasting hot green Plymouth, my button-down conservative dad had invented breakdancing. Mr. Toastmaster.
That was wonderful.
That was awesome.
Wow. And did I luck out picking the right opening line to come up with the